When I pulled up to Sierra Mesa Lane, the sun hit the mailbox like it was pointing at me. The HOA president was waiting on the curb before I could blink, a bright dress and a glare that said she'd been rehearsing this meeting for a long time. Right then, I learned moving and wasn't going to be about boxes and keys. It was going to be about who gets to belong. My name is Maya Collins. I'm 35. I spent 8 years as a Navy medic, and I thought after 12 hours of driving, the hardest part would be finding the right corner for the couch. I had Kay with me, my college friend who packs emergency granola like it's a survival skill, and we were still laughing about how tiny my kitchen was when Evelyn Hartwell stepped out from behind a perfectly trimmed hedge and announced, loud enough for everyone within earshot, "This is private parking. We have rules." I handed her my moving permit. She skimmed it like someone skimming a book she already hates. "That doesn't look signed by our committee," she sniffed. "Do you live here?" I told her yes. She told me I must have the wrong house. Then she said, "People like you don't usually move into a place like this." There was more than rules in her voice. There was entitlement, a practiced territorialism that shows up in neighborhoods where committees become crowns. For a second, I felt that old, heavy simmer of being judged. I'd felt it in hospital wards, in lineups at airports, in places where strangers measure you up and decide. Kay didn't let it sit. She handed Evelyn our deed and pushed a stack of papers into a neighbor's hands. Phones came out, because of course they did. Someone was recording. Evelyn dialed 911 like she was starting a ritual. 2 officers showed up, polite, measured, doing the job of making strangers feel like there's a rule book for everything. "ID, proof of ownership," they asked. I handed over the deed, my ID, the keys, the sort of boring paperwork that suddenly feels heroic when you need it. The younger officer flipped through the documents and said, "Everything checks out." Evelyn tried to contest it, to allege a missing permit or a misfiled signature, but each claim landed thinner than the last. Power is noisy and quiet at the same time. Evelyn's had volume calls, emails, the righteous tone of someone determined to be the gatekeeper. My power that afternoon was paperwork and patience, deed, dates, signatures. The officers stepped between us and said plainly, "You have the right to be here." The cameras on porches stayed on. The neighbors' team kept filming, but the official seal of acceptance changed the tenor of the street. After the police left, Evelyn retreated to her house with a binder of petitions and a look that said she'd write the rules before she'd let them be questioned. I learned later she'd been on the board for years, liked the role, liked the quiet authority. That week, the neighborhood was a weird mix of small kindnesses and cold shoulders. A bag of cookies appeared on my porch, a woman refused to move her car, and Louise from 2 doors down brought over a toolbox and an offer to build shelves. Evelyn tried to push back the way small tyrants do, an email to the community about preserving cohesion, a petition about parking, thinly veiled suggestions that exceptions shouldn't be made. But when someone tries to exclude you, they reveal where the soft spots are. People started to show up for their own reasons. The teacher who lived 3 houses down remembered I'd helped a kid at the clinic years ago. The man with the roses across the street watched silently from his porch and later offered to help fix my fence. Small actions, strange alliances, that's how neighborhoods actually work. I keep thinking about the small rituals that spell who belongs in a place, the way mailboxes are mended, how community events are run, who gets to decide what's neat and what's wrong. Evelyn curated those rituals like an art form. She had the language, the petitions, the network. When she told me I didn't belong, it exposed something basic. Belonging is often held like currency, and some folks trade in it for power. At the police scene, a quiet officer leaned over and said something I still carry. Sometimes the rules are about paper, sometimes they're about people policing people. He said it without judgment, just a recognition. That moment felt like a tiny truce between official procedure and human fairness. It doesn't fix everything, but it matters. The board meeting felt cinematic, petitions spread like placards, neighbors in their Sunday best, Evelyn at the front like she was conducting. She spoke of covenants and cohesion. I spoke of packing boxes and wanting a place to rest. My voice didn't boom. It was steady, and I tried to make my words a bridge, not a battle. I read the covenants before I signed. I said, "I take this place as seriously as you do. I'm not asking for exception. I'm asking for chance." The room hummed. Someone muttered about precedent, someone else about decency. There's a moment in any small fight where you realize the outcome isn't just about you. When someone stands up in a meeting, it gives permission to others. That permission is how things change, incrementally and sometimes messily. The vote that day didn't declare me the victor of the world. It simply said that the community didn't want a new rule to target one driveway. That's small, but in the architecture of neighborhoods, small bricks stack into walls or into bridges. Evelyn tried to stage a comeback with a signature drive and whispered reminders about protecting standards, but the pattern had shifted. Neighbors who'd watched from behind blinds started showing up in small ways. Louise offered ladders and dinner. The teacher invited me to a block book club. A woman who'd refused to move her car one morning knocked on my door with a pie and said she was sorry. The teen who filmed the first confrontation offered to send the footage to me. He told me he hadn't expected things to escalate the way they did. I won't pretend there weren't scars. There were nights I cried in the bathroom and mornings where I felt watched. There were notes left on windshields and curt nods when Evelyn drove by. She didn't disappear, she adapted. Some days she passed with a stiff nod. Other days she brought over a casserole with a smile that might have been truce or theater. We both wore the aftermath in different ways. But then, months later, when I finally set a plant on the sill and a neighbor I barely knew paused to say she admired how I handled it, how I chose to stay rather than walk away, that felt like a kind of belonging being offered back. Not because I'd won a war, but because people saw something in the way I showed up that made them want to show up too. Inclusion, I learned, isn't a single ruling handed down from a committee. It's the accumulation of small choices people make every day. So that's the story. Boxes, a binder, a police officer's nod, a vote that mattered because people finally spoke. I moved in, hung pictures, and slowly the house began to feel less like a temporary stop and more like an address that answered to my name. I put a framed photo of my mother on the mantel. She smiled in it, the kind of small, stubborn smile that belongs in houses, and I thought about how much those small certainties matter. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever moved into a place and felt unwelcome? Or maybe you watched someone get shut out and wondered why the rules weren't working for people and were working for power. Drop a comment, tell me what you would have done, and don't be shy about saying whether you think the HOA was right or wrong. If this story hits a nerve, share it with someone who's dealt with a small, stubborn fight for belonging. And if you like honest, human stories, those messy, local dramas that feel like a movie and make you think, subscribe for more.